Thinking about birding southwestern Saskatchewan? This video follows a one-week self-guided itinerary through Grasslands National Park, Cypress Hills, and the Regina area, highlighting specialty prairie birds and some trip planning logistics. I'm Paul Nicholson, an Ontario birder who's just back from a week in that area. In a week, you can cover some good ground and see a nice mix of habitats at a reasonable pace. We flew into Regina, birded west to Swift Current, spent 3 nights around Grasslands National Park, then 3 nights at Cypress Hills before looping back to Regina. It's easy to tack on interesting bonus birding side trips as well. We were pleased with our pace, spending several nights in a couple of places, let us revisit some good areas, bird at different times of the day, and simply enjoy the experience. If your flight lands in Regina by midday, you'll have time to get in some shore birding by Chaplin Lake and Reed Lake along the Trans-Canada. Expect prairie shorebird specialties such as American avocet and Wilson's phalarope, as well as prairie blackbirds, some cool gulls, and several waterfowl and sparrow species. This is where we found our first chestnut-collared Longspur. If you need a stretch, Chaplin Nature Center in the town of Chaplin is a fine stop. On day 2, driving south towards Val Marie, the gateway to Grasslands National Park, we made a stop at Lac Pelletier, just north of Cadillac. It was bird-rich. We saw Wilson snipe and yellow-headed blackbird here. We popped into the Grasslands Visitor Center in Val Marie, and then went straight to the West Block's Eco Tour Scenic Drive. There weren't many birders here, but we found birds. Even the first few kilometers were excellent for prairie specialties, including chestnut-collared longspur, grasshopper sparrow, brewer's sparrow, lark bunting, and western meadowlark. At the top Dogtown stop, we were hopeful of seeing burrowing owl, since it's a species that takes advantage of the black-tailed prairie dog's burrows. Instead, we watched an American badger hunting for a meal. A good spot to see roosting common nighthawks is around the Frenchman River Valley campground. At Lower Dogtown, we scoped the fields and did find a family of burrowing owls, as well as long-billed curlew. Hiking up 70 Mile Butte in the West Block is another classic Grasslands box to tick. It's a bit of a climb, but if you're fit, this trail is fine. We found rock wren and lark sparrow here. Our itinerary allowed for a day at the less visited East Block of Grasslands National Park, which is about a 2-hour drive from Val Marie. The highlight here was birding on the Badlands Parkway. If you're there in the early morning, you might have a shot at witnessing a sharp-tailed grouse lek. We missed that, but did see one sharp-tailed grouse. We also had Say's phoebe, Mountain Bluebird, Baird sparrow, and Sprague's Pipit. We were surprised to be encouraged by park staff to hike off the road into the grass along Rock Creek or into the coulees. In and near the hamlet of Val Marie itself, we saw Eurasian collar dove, lark sparrow, black-billed magpie, and loggerhead shrike. While driving around this area, always be on the lookout for ringneck pheasant, gray partridge, and Ferruginous Hawk. On our repositioning day, going west from Grasslands to Cypress Hills, we made a few random stops where longspurs were picked up by the Merlinap. Old Man on His Back, a Nature Conservancy of Canada property, was another good surprise. We found dozens of common nighthawks here. Cypress Hills, an interprovincial park shared with Alberta, really surprised us. It's an elevated island of forest in the middle of the vast prairie, so it's home to a much different set of birds. We notched northern saw-whet owl, McGillivray's warbler, goshawk, red-naped sapsucker, American three-toed woodpecker, and western warbling vireo here, along with some regional flycatchers and finches. As previously mentioned, we enjoyed several short yet worthwhile side trips, including Mountain Lake just northwest of Val Marie. At Cypress Lake, just south of Cypress Hills Park, we saw western and Clark's grebes, as well as cinnamon teal and black tern. At Fort Walsh, we saw violet green swallow and mountain bluebird. Pressing on from Fort Walsh, we picked up western tanager with an assist from the Merlin app. And then we checked out Reeser Lake and Elk Water just over the Alberta border. On our last full day before our flight home, we had time to zip up to Buffalo Pound Provincial Park north of Moose Jaw, where we finally caught up with a spotted towhee. On any birding trip, it's fair game to hope for unexpected sightings. For us, it was a dickcissel at Grasslands, and on our last morning in Regina at Wascana Lake by the provincial legislature, a snowy egret. For you, it'll be a different surprise. If you care to drill down into bird sightings, simply explore current eBird posts, or to view our trip list that includes our route details and all of our sightings from this late June 2026 adventure, scan this QR code. Apart from the birds, the prairie wildflowers, including cacti in bloom, were beautiful, and we saw 13 species of mammals, including pronghorn, bison, badger, black-tailed prairie dog, red fox, white-tailed jackrabbit, coyote, and moose. Now some logistics notes. For accommodations, our trip was anchored by multi-day bookings at the Sanctuary Inn in Val Marie and at the resort at Cypress Hills and Cypress Hills Park. We locked these reservations down early before we purchased flight tickets. These were good choices for us. Booking other hotels as needed in Regina or Moose Jaw or Swift Current is easy. If you're more of a camper, you'll have more options, including Authentics glamping in both the west and east blocks of Grasslands National Park. For meals away from the Trans-Canada Corridor, planning is important. This is not a tour for foodies. At the Sanctuary Inn, we had a kitchen, and this was key. We actually brought along 2 collapsible coolers and a few ice packs, so after having provisioned at a big grocery store in Moose Jaw, we were good to go. We picked up a few other items along the way at some of the small hamlets we passed through, and in Cypress Hills and Maple Creek, a few restaurant and takeout options presented themselves. The main highways are paved, and secondary gravel roads are deemed to be passable in all but the fiercest weather. However, a lot of our birding was done on dirt back roads. If it's been dry for a day or more, it's likely clear sailing. But if there's been rain, many of these roads turned into rutted muck called gumbo, in which you might get mired. Signage and locals warn of this. For example, if you opt to go to Fort Walsh, only take the Gap Road if it's dry and there's no rain in the forecast. Otherwise, stay off it and instead take 21 north to Maple Creek and Highway 271 back to the southwest. Gas is widely available. Even in many of the very small towns, there are often funky, unstaffed gas stations with above-ground tanks. They work well. The cell signal is sometimes spotty or even non-existent in parts of southwest Saskatchewan. Also, signage is often surprisingly poor. We had a couple of old-school maps with us. In terms of park access, Parks Canada had waived entrance fees, but they do typically apply. Visit parks.canada.ca for details. And for Cypress Hills Interprovincial Park, we purchased a multi-day pass online at parks.saskatchewan.ca. We brought a sighting scope with us, and it proved to be useful at several locations. Because we weren't well familiar with some of the Saskatchewan birds, we also used Merlin, and it was very helpful in picking up some of the longspurs, new sparrows, and other species. Regional health and safety risks are few. At the top of this list is avoiding gumbo-covered roads. Stay off them and watch the forecasts. The next biggest risk is being unlucky or stupid around wildlife such as moose or prairie rattlesnake. The Lyme disease risk is much lower than in southwestern Ontario. That's the trip in a nutshell. Southwestern Saskatchewan feels like one of Canada's best kept birding secrets. It's beautiful and it's great for breeding grassland birds on territory. If you do decide to go, good luck. I wish you sunny skies and good birds.